I never imagined there would be a day when silence would hurt more than screams. But the day my husband and my 2 children died, silence became the loudest sound in my life. The accident happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. One moment, I was folding laundry, irritated that my youngest had spilled juice on the couch again. The next moment, my phone rang, and a stranger's voice told me words that didn't make sense. "There's been an accident. We did everything we could. I'm so sorry." I remember dropping the phone. I remember my knees giving out. I remember the strange calm that wrapped around me, as if my body refused to accept reality. My husband, my safe place. My children, my heartbeat outside my chest. Gone. Just like that. The days that followed blurred together. Paperwork. Police questions. Hospital hallways that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Choosing coffins for the people I loved most felt like a cruel joke the universe was playing on me. I kept thinking someone would stop me, laugh, and tell me it was all a mistake. The night before the funeral, I sat alone in my empty house, surrounded by toys that would never be used again and clothes that still smelled like my husband's cologne. That was when I called my parents. My hand shook as I held the phone. No matter how old you are, when your world collapses, you want your parents. You want your mother's arms. You want your father's voice telling you everything will somehow be okay. My mother answered first. Her voice sounded distracted, like I had interrupted something important. "Mom," I whispered. "They're gone." There was a pause. "Who's gone?" "My husband, and the kids." My voice broke. "They're all gone. The funeral is tomorrow. I need you." Another pause. Then she said, "Your father is here. Let me put you on speaker." My father's voice came through next, steady, calm, almost impatient. I explained again, choking on every word. I told him I was burying my entire family. I told him I was scared. I told him I couldn't do this alone. And then he said the sentence that shattered whatever was left of me. "Today is your sister's birthday," he replied calmly. "We can't come." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. My brain searched for hidden meaning, for compassion disguised as practicality. But there was none. It's her birthday?" I repeated. "Dad, I'm talking about a funeral." "Yes," he said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Guests are already invited. She'd be devastated if we cancelled." My mother didn't say a word. Not one protest. Not one tear. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. The next day, I stood between 3 coffins under a gray sky that matched the emptiness inside me. Friends and distant relatives came. Neighbors brought flowers. Strangers cried for me. But my parents didn't come. My sister didn't come. While I lowered my children into the ground, somewhere else there was cake being cut. Candles being blown out. Laughter filling a room that didn't have space for my grief. That was the day I lost my family twice. And that was the day I learned a truth that would change everything. When it mattered most, I was on my own. After the funeral, the world didn't stop. That was the cruelest part. The sun still rose every morning, birds still sang, and people still complained about traffic and weather, as if my entire universe hadn't been buried in the ground. My parents never called. Not the day after the funeral. Not the week after. Not even on the day that should have been my anniversary. My sister posted pictures from her birthday party instead, smiling, surrounded by balloons and wrapped gifts. My parents commented with hearts and proud words, telling her how special she was. I stared at those pictures late at night, my phone glowing in the darkness, and realized something terrifying: my grief didn't fit into their lives. The house felt too big and too quiet. My children's laughter had vanished, replaced by echoes that haunted every room. Their shoes still sat by the door. Their drawings were still taped to the fridge. I slept on the couch because the bedroom felt like a crime scene, too intimate, too empty. Some nights, I didn't sleep at all. I just sat on the floor, hugging my knees, counting my breaths to remind myself I was still alive. I went to grief counseling because I had no one else to talk to. The therapist didn't try to fix me. She didn't tell me to stay strong. She just listened. She let me say my children's names out loud without flinching. That alone felt like a miracle. There were days I hated my parents. Days I rehearsed speeches in my head, everything I would say if they ever called. And then there were days I felt nothing at all. No anger. No sadness. Just emptiness. I learned that grief isn't loud all the time. Sometimes it's quiet, heavy, and suffocating. Bills still had to be paid. Legal paperwork still needed signatures. Life demanded decisions when I barely had the energy to breathe. So I did the only thing I could. I moved forward one task at a time. I didn't do it bravely. I did it because stopping felt like dying. Somewhere in those 6 months, something inside me began to change. I stopped waiting for my parents to show up. I stopped checking my phone for apologies that never came. I blocked my sister's social media, not out of spite, but self-preservation. Every smile she posted felt like a knife reminding me of the day they chose her happiness over my survival. I started pouring my pain into something constructive. Late at night, when sleep refused to come, I worked. I planned. I built. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not because it was a secret, but because I had learned that the people who ignored my grief didn't deserve access to my healing. Grief stripped me down to nothing, and from that nothing, I rebuilt myself quietly. I became independent in ways I never had to be before. I learned to make decisions alone. I learned to trust myself. I learned that survival doesn't always look like strength, it often looks like refusing to give up. 6 months passed without a single message from my parents. And by the time they remembered I existed, I was no longer the woman they had abandoned. I was becoming someone they would never see coming. 6 months after the funeral, life had begun to stabilize in a way I hadn't thought possible. I had built a routine around survival, around honoring my husband and children in the quietest ways, smiling when I could, working when I had energy, and refusing to shrink for anyone who didn't show up when it mattered. I had started my own small business, a venture born from sleepless nights and determination, fueled by grief that refused to consume me completely. It was modest at first, just enough to keep me busy and distracted, but it quickly gained traction. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I didn't need their validation. And then came the day that would forever change the dynamics of our relationship. I was sipping coffee in my tiny apartment when my phone buzzed incessantly. Emails, notifications, social media alerts, I ignored most of it until one headline flashed across my screen. Young entrepreneur turns tragedy into triumph, my name, makes $1 million impact in 6 months. At first, I couldn't breathe. The words blurred. I reread the headline 3 times, then clicked the link. The article detailed how my business had skyrocketed in revenue, how my initiatives were helping communities affected by loss, and how I had transformed personal tragedy into something larger than myself. It was surreal. And then, as the initial shock faded, a slow, intoxicating realization washed over me. The world knew my name, and my parents had no idea until now. By the afternoon, the phone calls began. First, a number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then my parents' names flashing on the screen. My sister called, voice trembling. My father's number appeared next. My stomach clenched, but instead of panic, I felt something entirely new, calm. Mom? I answered, letting my voice sound collected, measured. My name, we just saw the article. This is incredible, she stammered. My father's voice came next, tight, strained. Why didn't you tell us? We had no idea, how could you do this without us? I listened to their frantic, almost desperate words and felt a strange sense of vindication. The same parents who couldn't make it to the funeral, who ignored my grief, who chose my sister's cake over my children's coffins, were now scrambling for attention. I let them talk. I let them realize, for the first time, the gap between their indifference and my achievement. Why didn't you come to my side when it mattered? I asked finally, calm but cutting. My voice held no anger, just a truth they had refused to face. I had no one. I built everything alone. And now, you're 6 months too late. The calls ended abruptly after that. Silence fell again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't the hollow silence of abandonment, it was the silence of power. They had finally seen me, not as a daughter to be ignored, but as a force to be reckoned with. That night, I sat by the window, looking out at the city lights, thinking of my husband and children. They would have been proud of me, not because of money or recognition, but because I had survived. Because I had grown. Because I had honored their lives with strength, dignity, and courage. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the sweetest revenge was not in their panic or jealousy, it was in the knowledge that I didn't need them to validate me. I had lived, I had thrived, and they had missed it all. The headline had changed everything. But more importantly, it had changed me. By the time Chapter 3's headline had spread like wildfire, my family's frantic attempts to reconnect felt almost laughable. Their calls, texts, and messages poured in, filled with excuses, apologies that sounded rehearsed, and frantic curiosity about my life. My sister wanted to come see me, my mother wanted to talk, and my father wanted to lecture me about independence and success as if it had been their idea all along. For a moment, I considered answering them. Part of me ached for their approval, for the warmth that had never come when I truly needed it. But I quickly remembered the coffin-lined driveway, the empty seats at my family's table, the coldness when I told them about my husband and children. That memory reminded me why I could never go back. I decided instead to respond in the only way that felt right, silence, mixed with quiet, unstoppable progress. I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't need to justify my success. I didn't need their presence to validate my achievements. Every morning, I woke up in my own home, surrounded by the life I had built from scratch. Every night, I went to bed feeling proud of the woman I had become. And with every passing day, the truth hit harder. The sweetest revenge is living so fully, so unapologetically, that the people who abandoned you are left behind. Months passed. Their panic faded into awkward attempts at casual conversation. My sister tried to reconnect over brunch invitations, my mother sent long-winded messages about family values, my father called, saying, "We're still family, you know." I listened politely. I never screamed, never cried. I never begged. I simply let them see that nothing they did, or didn't do, could take from me what I had earned, my peace, my dignity, my strength. One afternoon, my sister showed up unannounced, standing on my doorstep, with a bouquet of flowers trembling in her hands. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her. "Do you know why I didn't call?" I asked quietly, firmly. "Do you know why you didn't hear from me?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "Because for 6 months, when I needed you most, none of you were here. You chose cake over coffins. Balloons over my children. That is not something I can forget, or forgive." The words hung in the air like invisible chains. I didn't need her to respond. I didn't need her apology. I had built a life that didn't require them. That was the ultimate revenge, showing up for myself when no one else would. I closed the door gently, smiling to myself. The flowers stayed on the porch, untouched. That night, I lit candles for my husband and children. I spoke to them in whispers, telling them about the life I had rebuilt. I shared my victories, my laughter, my quiet moments of joy. They were the only family I truly needed, and I honored their memory by living fully. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since the accident: freedom. Freedom from guilt, from abandonment, from people who failed to love me when it mattered. I realized that my parents and sister would always be in the background of my story, but they no longer had control over the plot. Sweet revenge, I finally understood, isn't about retribution. It's about rising above betrayal and living a life so full, so meaningful, That the ones who doubted or abandoned you are left staring from the sidelines, powerless. I survived. I thrived. I became everything they refused to see. And in that, I found peace, strength, and the ultimate victory, my life, unshackled, fully my own.